Hi, welcome back to Animal Encounters. Today we're looking at safari trips that turn deadly after one small decision put someone far closer to wildlife than they realized. We begin in Zambia, where a married couple stepped up a few feet just off the trail during a walking safari and walked straight into a leopard hiding over its fresh kill. It was August 14th, 2021. The dry season had turned South Luangwa National Park in Zambia into brittle grass and dust. A married couple was walking through the bush on foot, only a few feet from a leopard neither of them could see. Ethan Donovan was 41 years old. He worked as a financial consultant in Brisbane, Australia. His wife Claire was 38 and designed interiors for a living. The two of them had waited 2 years to take their 10th anniversary trip, and they picked a walking safari on purpose. They wanted something that felt real, not just a car window between them and animals. Ethan had already booked 3 different game drives on past trips, and this time he wanted to actually feel the ground under his boots. The couple had almost no real experience with African wildlife. They had watched plenty of safari videos online before the trip, and somewhere along the way they picked up an idea that a lot of tourists carry with them. Big cats supposedly just walked away when they saw a person coming close. That idea is exactly the kind of thing that gets people hurt out here, and I think it is worth slowing down on for a second. Watching a leopard through a phone screen and standing a few feet from one in the wild are two completely different experiences. A screen cannot hurt you. Dry grass in the bush can hide something that will, but the bush can. Late that afternoon, the walking group stopped near a dry riverbed. Their guide crouched down to point out fresh tracks pressed into the sand, explaining they were at least a day old. While the group focused on the tracks, Ethan stepped a few paces off the trail to photograph an old sausage tree standing alone against the sky. Claire followed behind him. Hidden in the thick brush nearby was a leopard. It had killed an impala less than an hour earlier and dragged the body deep into the bushes to hide it from vultures and hyenas circling overhead. This is something leopards do after almost every kill. The guide could not see the carcass from where he stood, and Ethan and Claire had no way of spotting it either. Claire noticed flies buzzing thick around one patch of bushes just ahead. She thought there might be something worth photographing hidden inside, maybe a bird resting in the shade. She stepped closer to look, and Ethan came up right behind her, camera already raised to his eye. They had no way of knowing they were walking straight toward a leopard that had already decided this kill was worth fighting for. In that quiet moment, before anyone understood what was happening, the outcome had already been decided. They just did not know it yet. The African leopard usually weighs between 80 and 150 pounds, and it is known across the continent for stashing food in thick cover to protect it from bigger scavengers. A leopard guarding a fresh kill is far more likely to stand its ground than one encountered in open country. It defends that kill the same way it would defend against a hyena or a rival cat, and it gives almost no warning before committing fully to an attack. Here is where everything happened at once. The leopard shot out of the bushes from just a few yards away, moving low and fast across the dry ground. It did not pause, and it did not bluff. It slammed into Claire first, driving her down onto her back before she could even raise her arms. Ethan dropped his camera and lunged toward his wife, grabbing at the leopard's shoulder to pull it off her. The leopard released Claire and spun on Ethan instead, knocking him flat and biting down hard into the side of his neck. The guide closed the distance, shouting as he advanced. Unable to risk hitting Ethan or Claire, he fired a single shot into the ground beside the leopard. The animal finally broke off and vanished into the brush. I think the hardest part of this moment is Ethan's decision to grab the leopard with his bare hands instead of backing away. It was the natural thing to do, the human thing to do. But it also put him directly in the leopard's path a second time, and that single choice changed how the next few minutes unfolded. Claire had suffered a deep bite wound to her throat that tore through her carotid artery, and she was bleeding out fast on the dry ground. Ethan's neck wound had damaged his jugular vein, and he was losing blood just as quickly a few feet away from her. The guide radioed for an emergency helicopter, but the nearest hospital equipped for trauma like this was hours away by road. Claire died from blood loss right there at the scene, before the helicopter ever arrived. Ethan was still breathing when it landed, but he lost consciousness during the flight and died shortly after from the same severe blood loss. Rangers later found the hidden impala carcass just a few yards from the attack site, tucked deep in the same bushes Claire had walked toward only minutes earlier. I keep coming back to one detail from this case. They did not do anything that felt reckless in the moment. They were just curious. They followed some flies into a bush the way almost anyone might on a quiet afternoon walk. That is the part that stays with me the most. The line between a harmless decision and a deadly one is not marked anywhere in the bush. It is just a patch of dry grass and a leopard that got there first. That was danger hiding in silence, a kill nobody could see until it was already too late. Our next story trades the quiet bush for an open road in broad daylight, where a man with a selfie stick decided a warning sign did not apply to him, and a bull elephant made sure that mistake was his last one. It was March 15th, 2018. Along the banks of the Nile, inside Murchison Falls National Park in Uganda, elephants gathered in growing numbers as the dry season pushed wildlife toward the park's permanent water source. Cole Evan was 34 years old. He had built a software company back in Austin, Texas, and sold it for $12 million. He came to Uganda looking for fresh content for his growing online following, and he had a habit of treating safety briefings as gentle suggestions rather than actual rules. Cole had taken trips like this before, always chasing bigger shots for his page. He was traveling with his girlfriend, and the two of them had joined a small group safari through the park. Before the vehicle even left camp that morning, the guide gave everyone a simple instruction. Stay inside the vehicle at all times, no matter what you see out there. The guide had also noticed something about one particular bull elephant that Cole never picked up on. This bull was in a condition called musth, a periodic state where testosterone spikes hard and males become far more aggressive than usual. Local guides watch for this constantly, because a bull in musth behaves nothing like the calm giants people picture from nature documentaries. It can turn violent, with almost no buildup at all. Elephants kill hundreds of people across Africa every year, and encounters involving bulls in musth are among the most dangerous. A normal bull elephant might tolerate people nearby for a while. A bull in musth treats almost everything as a threat that needs to be dealt with immediately. Later that morning, the vehicle slowed near the road where a lone bull was browsing on some low branches. Cole spotted his shot right away and told his girlfriend he was just going to grab a quick photo. Before the guide could stop him, Cole pushed open the vehicle door and jumped out with his phone already mounted on an extendable selfie stick. The guide immediately shouted for him to get back inside, but Cole waved without turning around and kept walking toward the elephant, closing the distance to about 50 feet. The elephant's ears flared out wide, and its head lifted up sharply. Both of these are warning signs that any experienced guide would recognize instantly. Instead of backing away, Cole turned his back to the animal so he could fit himself into the shot with the elephant standing behind him. I think this is the detail that gets me the most. He turned his back on an animal that weighs more than 5 pickup trucks combined, all so he could squeeze himself into a photo. The elephant had already told him everything he needed to know through its body language, and he chose a better camera angle over every single one of those warnings. And that is where things changed fast. The elephant lowered its head and charged. Cole heard the ground shake behind him and turned just in time to see the animal closing in at an estimated 22 miles per hour. He dropped the selfie stick and tried to run back toward the vehicle, but his foot caught on the uneven ground and he went down hard. The elephant reached him within seconds. It drove one front foot down into his chest, then trampled over him a second time before finally moving off toward the tree line. The guide later said he heard one scream from outside the vehicle, and then nothing at all. I wonder how short that whole sequence really was. From the moment Cole turned his back to the moment the elephant reached him, there was barely enough time to react at all. That is the part people underestimate the most about an animal this size. The size that makes it look slow and lumbering from a distance is the exact same size that makes it impossible to outrun once it decides to move. Park rangers arrived and declared Cole dead at the scene. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the chest, along with severe internal bleeding from a crushed rib cage. His body was flown back to Kampala before being sent home. Wildlife officials later used the incident to reinforce park rules requiring visitors to stay inside safari vehicles, especially around elephants showing signs of musth. His girlfriend needed counseling for months afterward. His account was memorialized online, but investigators recovered his phone, and the footage it captured was never released publicly. His family chose to keep it private, leaving only his last written caption behind as any kind of public record. There is something almost cruel about how this one ended. He spent the whole trip chasing the perfect shot for an audience, and the very last thing he ever filmed became the thing people remember him for, just not in the way he had pictured. That was a man who forgot which side of the camera he was really standing on. Our next story moves from dry grassland to murky river water, where a photographer who thought he understood crocodiles found out the hard way that patience is the most dangerous thing about them. It was November 10th, 2020. The Olifants River inside Kruger National Park in South Africa had shrunk down to a slow brown trickle. A wildlife filmmaker lay flat on his stomach in the mud, inching toward the water for one more shot, completely unaware of what was already watching him from below the surface. Ben Sullivan was 28 years old and ran a wildlife YouTube channel out of Australia with a rapidly growing audience. His channel was built around extreme close-up footage of dangerous animals, the kind of shots most professional photographers would never attempt on foot. People who worked with him described him as increasingly confident around dangerous animals. Ben pulled over at an unfenced roadside viewpoint overlooking the Olifants River. Visitors could stop there briefly, but leaving the viewpoint to climb down toward the riverbank was strictly prohibited. Unlike the fenced picnic areas elsewhere in the park, this overlook had no barrier separating the viewing area from the steep bank below. Local guides knew large crocodiles regularly used this stretch of river. I think this is worth pointing out early. Calling a crocodile lazy is one of the most dangerous ideas a person can carry into the bush. A crocodile is not lazy. It is patient, and patience is far more dangerous than speed or aggression could ever be. Nile crocodiles are ambush predators, and the largest ones in Kruger can grow past 13 feet long. They are responsible for hundreds of deaths across Africa every year, more than any other large animal on the continent. A crocodile does not chase its prey the way a lion does. It waits completely still, sometimes for hours, until something comes close enough for one single lunge. Ignoring park regulations, Ben climbed out of his vehicle and down the riverbank, then lay flat on his stomach in the mud, apparently trying to capture an extremely low-angle close-up near the river's edge. Unbeknownst to Ben, a large crocodile was already lying fully submerged near the bank, invisible beneath the murky water. As Ben shifted forward another few inches, small ripples spread across the surface. The crocodile's sensory organs around its jaws detected the tiny vibrations. For me, this is the most underestimated part. A crocodile does not need to see a person to detect where movement is coming from. It reads vibration in the water almost the way we read a face, and Ben had just given away his exact position without making a sound. And that is where everything changed in an instant. The crocodile exploded from the water, closing the distance before Ben had any chance to react. Its jaws clamped around his leg with enough force to pull him straight off the bank. He grabbed at the grass along the edge, but the crocodile pulled harder and dragged him into deeper water within seconds. Once submerged, it began rolling violently, a move crocodiles use to disorient and drown prey. His camera, still mounted on the bank, kept recording for several more seconds before the whole scene disappeared beneath the surface. Nile crocodiles can generate bite forces of roughly 5,000 pounds, among the strongest ever measured in a living animal. Once the death roll begins, there is very little a person can do, since the crocodile is using its full body weight against the water itself. Search teams spent days on the river, but recovered only partial remains. They later found his damaged camera on the riverbank, but no footage from the attack was ever released publicly. I find myself circling back to how confident he must have felt going into that shot. He built his entire channel around getting closer than anyone else dared, and the one time it actually mattered, that same confidence put him within arm's reach of an animal that had been waiting there the whole time. That patience was turned into an ambush along a quiet riverbank. Our next story trades daylight for total darkness, where a doctor decided a 20-yard walk to the bathroom was too short to bother waking anyone for an armed escort. It was September 22nd, 2017. Along the Luangwa River in Zambia, a small safari camp sat quiet under a moonless sky. A doctor stepped outside his tent alone that night, certain a short walk in the dark could not possibly go wrong. Dr. Raj Patel was 42 years old and worked as a respected cardiologist back in London. He had added a short safari onto the end of a medical mission trip, treating it as a personal reward after weeks of long hours in a hospital. He was careful and precise in his professional life, the kind of person who checked every detail before making a decision. That same carefulness seemed to disappear the moment he stepped into an unfamiliar setting like this one. Camp staff had given every guest one simple rule at check-in. Nobody leaves their tent after dark without an armed escort, no matter how short the walk seems. Raj had been warned that hippos are widely regarded as one of Africa's deadliest large animals, and that attacks on people are far more common than most visitors realize. I have read that line so many times now, in so many different accounts. He dismissed it as exaggerated. He thought the warnings were for other people. He figured the numbers were inflated. Every single time I read it, I want to reach through the page and shake them, because the numbers are not a suggestion. The numbers are the body count. The numbers are the people who thought exactly the same thing and never got to say, "I told you so." At 2 a.m, Raj woke up needing to use the bathroom. The toilet block sat only about 20 yards from his tent, positioned right between his tent and the riverbank below. 20 yards felt like nothing to him, barely the length of a hospital hallway back home. He decided the distance was too short to bother waking anyone for an escort, so he grabbed his headlamp and walked out alone. What he did not know was that a bull hippo had come up out of the river that night to graze on grass near the edge of camp. The hippo was now resting directly between Raj and the water, right along one of the well-worn paths it regularly used to return to the river before sunrise. Hippos are among Africa's most dangerous large animals. A large bull can weigh up to 4,000 pounds. Its jaws can open to an angle of nearly 150 degrees, and its bite has been estimated at more than 1,800 pounds per square inch, enough force to crush bone and inflict catastrophic injuries. Raj's headlamp illuminated the hippo only after he had already unknowingly walked dangerously close. Startled at such close range and finding a person standing between itself and one of its well-worn paths back to the river, the bull reacted instantly. And that is where everything changed in the dark. Startled at close range with its escape route blocked, the hippo charged across the short stretch of ground before Raj even had time to register the light bouncing off its wet skin. It slammed into him and clamped its jaws around his torso, then dragged him several yards toward the water's edge. The camp's night watchman heard the commotion from his post, but could not safely approach in total darkness while the animal was still nearby. At first light, searchers found Raj's headlamp lying in the dirt, along with clear signs of a struggle leading down toward the riverbank. A search team recovered his body 3 days later, roughly 1.5 miles downstream after the current had carried it away. The post-mortem concluded that he had suffered catastrophic crushing injuries consistent with a hippo attack, with drowning also considered a contributing factor after he was pulled into the river. His family was notified through official channels back home in London. Camp staff reinforced the escort policy after the incident and emphasized it even more strongly during guest briefings. I keep thinking about what happens after stories like this. They will revise the protocols, and they will tell the next group of guests about the doctor who did not call for an escort, and the next group will nod and say, "Of course," and "How terrible," and then someone will do the same thing again, because that is the pattern. The rules are written in blood, but the blood is always someone else's, and the person who steps out into the dark always believes, right up until the last second, that the blood will not be theirs. 20 yards does not sound like much on paper, and that is exactly the problem. Distance on land and distance in the eyes of a territorial animal defending its path to water are two completely different things, and mixing them up cost Raj everything. That was a mistake made in silence and darkness. Our next story happens in broad daylight, on a public road, where a man leaned out of a car window for a better photo and found out that lions do not see a person the same way they see a vehicle. It was May 3rd, 2019. Heat pressed down hard over Kruger National Park in South Africa, the kind of afternoon that keeps most animals resting quietly in the shade. A man leaned his entire upper body out of a car window for a better photo, with no idea something was already watching him from the grass. Owen Miller was 29 years old and ran a small travel page online, showing people how to visit expensive places on a budget. He rented a small sedan for a self-drive safari instead of paying for a guided tour. It was his first trip into lion country, and after spending most of the morning fighting windshield glare and dust, he wanted a better shot. Owen spotted a pride of lions resting under a thick thorn bush about 45 feet from the road. 2 lionesses lay in the shade, while a few cubs slept nearby. Wanting a clearer angle, he turned off the engine, unbuckled his seatbelt, rolled the window all the way down, and leaned almost halfway out, resting his stomach on the door with both arms outside as he held his phone low to film. This is the part that makes me want to grab people by the shoulders and shake them. The car is not protecting you because it is strong. It protects you because lions become used to vehicles as large, predictable objects. The moment you lean out of the window, that protection can disappear. The lion can now distinguish a person from the vehicle, and you have just given up one of the biggest things keeping you safe. Lions in areas with regular vehicle traffic learn to treat cars as one large, harmless object that moves in predictable ways. That is why staying inside a vehicle is usually safe. The moment a person leans out of a window, that outline breaks, and the lion can recognize a person instead of just a vehicle. Hidden in the tall grass behind the thorn bush was a lioness. Owen never noticed. She had been lying completely still, watching long before he rolled his window down. Lions often watch quietly before deciding whether to investigate, which means the danger can already be nearby before anyone realizes it. And that is the part that gives me chills. She was already watching, not stalking, not hunting, just watching. Lions do not always charge the moment they see something. They wait, they assess, they let you forget they're even there. And while Owen was adjusting his camera angle, the lioness had already decided the movement was worth investigating. The lioness stalked through the grass in complete silence, moving low through his blind spot on the far side of the car. Owen never heard her until she exploded forward, closing the last few feet in under a second. She grabbed his shoulder and upper arm with her forelegs and bit into his shoulder. Because so much of his body was already outside the window, the force pulled him farther out. As he tried to pull himself back inside, he lost his grip, slipped farther out of the window, and fell into the lioness. A second lioness rushed over a moment later, and together they dragged him away from the car and into the tall grass. Owen died within minutes from a bite to the throat. The cause of death later listed as severe blood loss combined with trauma to the neck. Tourists in a nearby car watched the attack unfold and laid on their horns, but it was already too late. Rangers monitored the pride afterward to make sure it did not start associating vehicles with food, since that kind of learned behavior can put future visitors at risk. That was a mistake made from inside a car that should have kept him safe. Our final story leaves the road behind entirely, moving into a thick brush where a woman stepped away from her group to chase one more photo and found something far more protective than she ever expected, waiting in the leaves. It was November 11th, 2020. Yala National Park in Sri Lanka sat under the kind of still, heavy heat that keeps most animals resting quietly in whatever shade they can find. A woman stepped away from her safari vehicle to chase one quiet sound in the bushes, unaware of exactly what was waiting inside. Priya Nair was 35 years old and worked as a software project manager in Bengaluru, India. She had picked up wildlife photography as a new hobby after the pandemic delayed her travel plans for over a year. She was organized and successful in her career, the kind of person who planned everything down to the last detail, and she often assumed that same careful planning could make up for a lack of real experience out in the wild. During an afternoon safari, the vehicle stopped after the guides spotted fresh bear tracks crossing the road ahead. Everyone was told to stay inside the vehicle and wait quietly to see if the animal reappeared. While the group sat still, Priya noticed movement inside a nearby patch of bushes and assumed there might be a shy animal hiding just out of sight, something worth photographing before it wandered off. Without telling anyone in the vehicle, Priya quietly opened her door and stepped out, planning to get her shot fast and slip back into her seat before the guides even noticed. Hidden inside that dense vegetation was a female sloth bear with a young cub, feeding quietly on a mound of termites. Sloth bears are responsible for more attacks on people in India than any other bear species, largely because their eyesight is poor and they often react aggressively when surprised at close range. A mother sloth bear with a young cub is especially dangerous, since her first instinct is to protect her offspring from anything she suddenly perceives as a threat. Priya crouched low near the bushes, camera raised, trying to get a clear angle through the leaves. She had no idea she was only several feet away from a cub feeding quietly beside its mother.
And that is where everything changed in an instant.
The bear suddenly detected Priya at extremely close range and reacted immediately, treating her sudden appearance as a direct threat to her cub. Instead of retreating the way Priya expected, the bear launched a fast, low charge straight through the bushes. She knocked Priya flat onto her back before Priya could even raise her arms to protect herself, then began mauling her with powerful claws and quick, repeated bites aimed mostly at the head and upper body. This is typical defensive behavior for the species, a response shaped by generations of protecting cubs from potential predators in dense vegetation. This is the moment that always stays with me, because it is so easy to picture. 1 second, the bear was quietly feeding with her cub, and the next, a person had appeared only a few feet away through thick vegetation. To us, it looks like an overreaction. To the bear, it was a sudden threat at close range. It was not attacking because it wanted to hunt. It was protecting the only thing that mattered to it. Guides in the vehicle heard the commotion and reacted fast, shouting loudly and revving the engine to try to scare the bear off. After several long seconds of mauling, the bear finally broke off the attack and retreated back into the vegetation with her cub close behind her. Priya had suffered severe wounds to her head and neck, and the bleeding was too fast and too severe for anyone nearby to control. She died from her injuries before any medical evacuation could reach her in such a remote part of the park. I keep coming back to how ordinary this looks from the outside. She did not ignore a warning sign or cross a marked boundary. She just followed her own curiosity into some bushes on a quiet afternoon, the same way I might without a second thought.
To me, the line between watching wildlife safely and becoming part of the story yourself is thinner than most people realize, and you usually only find out which side you landed on when it is already too late.
Authorities ruled that leaving the vehicle and unknowingly walking into a mother bear's protective space directly caused the tragedy. The park has since used her case in guide briefings across the region, reminding staff and visitors alike to keep their distance from any fresh tracks spotted along the road, no matter how quiet or empty the bushes might look.